Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Hopefully this recording won't have to be listened to and it will simply serve as a practice, but on the off chance that my internet connection fails on Saturday or is incredibly slow, then hopefully at least there's something to listen to. So my name is Gareth Morris. I'm going to be talking about tackling career progression challenges, and if I give you a bit of insight in terms of where I'm coming from, I've worked at Xi'anjiaotong Liverpool University since 2011. I've served a decade at this institution and I'm currently into my last couple of months before I'll transition into a new employment area. I've been a module convener for a number of modules, which has involved leading small teams. I've also headed up a CLIL module. More recently, I've served as the Departmental Learning and Teaching Chair, sat on the Centre Management team, both for the Language Centre and now the English Language Centre, and I'm going to be taking on an EAL role at the Perth School, Suzhou. Today, I'll consider practitioners' career development challenges, leadership career development challenges from a mid-level perspective, and drawing quite heavily on my own personal experiences. And I'll also offer some recommendations for leaders and for also leading staff and staff in general. So if I begin by considering practitioners' career development challenges, well, I've been quite selective in terms of the literature, and part of that's pragmatic simply because it's a busy time of the year and I don't have the time to delve too deeply into all of the literature, and also because on that note there is a lot of it. So if I just consider some of the big kind of well-documented challenges, I think the career path one has been prominent for decades. I think it's well known within this field or subfield of education or teaching that what happens typically is careers top out, whether that's institutionally or beyond, and that does present a challenge. It's quite different to other fields where progression seems to be much more clear-cut and staff can keep moving upwards and onwards unless they obviously hit career blocks. Here it seems that career blocks are almost across the board in a lot of cases. And even if you do that comparison with just mainstream education, it presents a challenge. So again, on top of career path challenges, there's also longer term prospects and where people's are heading within their sort of working life. There are the employment conditions challenges, pay, pension, childcare are some that are often mentioned depending on the context. There is the social perspective and how practitioners in this field are perceived and viewed. And I think what's become apparent to me is that it's essential, if anybody wants to continue progressing in their career, to have the qualifications and to have the professional development, because without these, it's just the problems are just going to be exacerbated, basically. So if I draw on some of my own insights, I think other things that kind of hinder professionals and practitioners in their careers can be prescriptive teaching, because that stops people being able to grow and to learn. And it goes back to that old saying about, you can teach for 20 years, but have you had the same experience 20 times, or have you actually learned and built on what you've been doing over that period? Limited autonomy can also be a developmental barrier, because obviously if you're simply being told what to do, that becomes quite monotonous. I've heard the profession likened to, or areas of the profession likened to the equivalent to a factory floor worker or a factory line worker. So it's not exactly a glowing reference. Heavy marking loads can simply take away time, and it can just become assessment orientated if syllabus and curriculums are not carefully devised. Of course, assessments are essential, both formative and summative feedback is important to learners. But if it's constant marking, prescriptive teaching, limited autonomy, the chances to grow and develop are basically inhibited significantly. Bureaucratic management, workload time demands, questionable in-service professional development beyond onboarding, which is obviously essential for any organisation. Access to external training, which might be cost-related. Support and mental quality, assuming it's available. Limited and closed career paths, career path obstacles, subsequent motivation, incentives, career trade-offs. I think all of these areas can basically present professional development challenges of one kind or another. And once you start to get a collection of these challenges, then basically professional development becomes quite difficult, because somebody who's on a very prescriptive curriculum with heavy marking loads, not many avenues to develop and to explore, be it vertically or hierarchically, tired, a family to come back to at the end of the day, best will in the world, limited opportunities, motivation is going to be waning. Yes, it presents a big problem, I feel personally. If I then consider, beyond just, a practitioner, and I consider, practitioner leaders or leaders or practitioners, then again, there are an equally numerous amount of developmental challenges. Some of these challenges might be from the macro environment, some might be micro-contextual, some are situational, temporal, some might be because people come in with misaligned approaches based on the micro-macro context and the situation. And this might come back to a lack of training and support. There could also be interpersonal challenges. So in terms of leadership career development, even if the opportunities are there can be factors and features which impinge on one's ability to develop in a manner which is going to be beneficial to one and all, themselves and their staff. I think it's also important that we consider the horizontal and the vertical in terms of some of the aspects and the features which are important in terms of leadership. So I've got a range of literature listed here, but it's really more for topical to highlight the importance of these topics. Because for leaders, I think approachability, trust, communication, support, collaboration, a positive environment, and when I say two-way, horizontal and vertical, in all directions, 360 degrees, is essential. Because if leaders and leaders staff and leaders peers are not approachable, not trustworthy, or trust is questionable, communication isn't as great as it could be or should be, support isn't there, collaboration isn't there, or it's not as what's needed, the environment is less than ideal. Again, even if one has a position and a leadership position or a management position or an administrative management position, again, the challenges are going to be there, and the opportunity to really develop in that role and grow in that role may not present itself. In fact, the only thing that might present itself is burnout, fatigue, and cynicism in due course. And I do want to mention just briefly, I think ideally you want a meritocracy where people are given leadership opportunities based on merits rather than luck, connections, CV dressage, interview adeptness, patronage, etc. So there are a number of challenges which can impact on one's leadership career development prior to being given a position and post in a position. Based on my own experience, I think other features and factors or additional ones which can impact on one's leadership development might be the opportunities, readiness, 360-degree support and training, and a lot of this kind of goes back to what I've already mentioned. Barriers, maybe it's workload related, even if you cut back on the teaching, the administrative increases can be substantial. Time for in-service professional development, because again, if you don't have that luxury or that option, then with the best will in the world, you're almost navigating blindly in terms of what you're doing. You don't have any sort of insights to draw upon apart from perhaps personal experiences and others' experiences which you've heard about or come across. I think this is one of the nice things about cross-disciplinary or ideas from other fields, and I saw on the program that some of the insights from Nelson Mandela were mentioned. So again, these obviously can be kind of borne in mind as well. Other things which can impinge on leadership career development might be the relevance of internal in-service professional development, the cost of external options, leadership stress and burnout, a case of surviving rather than thriving. The social trade-offs, it's very difficult if you've got a family to continue to work in the evenings, and sometimes leadership demands that. In some contexts, working on weekends, both for practitioners and staff, can be expected. So that can be very difficult both emotionally and practically. career benefits, what are the benefits of taking on leadership roles? If the remuneration doesn't match the increased workload, then again, people are going to weigh up that equation. And career opportunities. So all of these are sort of important things to bear in mind. Now, I've listed some of the references which have informed my talk so far, simply because otherwise it's going to be a big list at the end. So some of the recommendations for leaders. Well, what I would suggest from a literature is, if you're coming into a role, or you're coming into an organisation, or you're coming into a division, then creating an identity for that area is important, so that everybody knows where things are heading and they can buy into that. I think also effective communication is really important. On top of that, building teams, developing networks, supporting staff, ensuring sustainability, because it's essential that should a leader depart and should key figures leave, the good work that's already been done can be sustained. The good initiatives can be maintained. I think, obviously the worst case scenario is obviously when one person departs, even if the entity keeps ticking along, a lot of the good work may be lost because a new person comes in and they want to, make a mark or leave an impression, and so, the cycles are reinvented or revisited, which can be problematic. So sustainability is important both in terms of leadership and initiatives which leadership might have set in motion. That's obviously on the assumption that something more dramatic is not required, and if things go badly or have been going badly, then perhaps a transformational approach is important. But if things have been going smoothly and there's been positivity, then I think it's important to have this aspect. And finally, I'd suggest, and again it kind of links in nicely with some of the other presentations, a personalised leadership approach, because it's very difficult to be something that one's not naturally. So it's basically finding an approach which is suitable to oneself, which oneself is comfortable with, or which you or I or anybody is comfortable with. So again, I think the literature is suggesting that successful leadership involves a whole host of different features and factors. Based on my own experience, I would suggest that it also necessitates motivation and resilience. It can be difficult, it can be draining, you can run into difficult situations with demanding people. And sometimes it's important to kind of take a step back, walk in their shoes, see things from their perspective. Hopefully, more often than not, if two people can meet in the middle, then a lot of these conflicts or issues or problems can be resolved. But it can be very difficult, especially for junior, new leaders who are basically finding their feet as they go. So to not feel threatened and to basically be able to detach oneself from perhaps the emotional side of it is important. And that does require resilience and motivation and support and training. So, I've mentioned a couple of those points. Opportunities obviously are important as well, because if people don't have the opportunities to continue to grow and develop, they'll probably look elsewhere. Experience is important, critical reflection is important. Tailored self-directed learning is also essential, because a lot of literature can be quite general, whether it's actually relevant to a specific context, a specific situation, it may not be. So again, this is where sort of the balance between literature, drawing on insights, but also having, say, someone in the system, a mentor, a senior figure who has the time to basically be supportive and give ideas and suggestions and help. If you can get that hybrid, it can be really very powerful. And of course, you want staff buy-in. So I think this humanistic quality is important. It's obviously very essential to have academic excellence, and we can talk about Bloom's taxonomy, etc. But I think a touch of Maslow is also essential, especially in trying times and difficult times. And if anything, the global pandemic is obviously the epitome of that. I think also, if we have the best interests of our staff in mind, and staff can see that we do have this, and we are basically we're not asking anyone to do anything that we're not prepared to do ourselves, then again this is very powerful, and it sets a very powerful tone and precedent. It may not appeal to everybody. I mean, nothing can. But again, I think by leading by example is important. So again, it's one of those where it's about finding the right approach for a situation at a given point in time. If I take a step back, a laissez-faire approach, which is often criticised in the literature, can be quite effective if you've got very well-motivated, knowledgeable teams who are already performing highly. They will not want someone who's stepping on their toes all the time. So it's about having a situationally, contextually appropriate, temporally appropriate approach. But all of these other factors and features are also essential, or at least very important. So recommendations for staff. Again, for anybody who's considering taking on a leadership role, or for anyone who's considering how to support their staff as they come into leadership positions, I think it's important that it's noted that there is no one best way to lead. Leadership happens at all levels and in a range of different capacities. You can lead in a classroom, you can lead a small project, you can lead a module, you can lead a division, you can lead a centre, you can lead and so it goes. So it happens at all levels in different capacities. Reflectivity, learning openness are really essential for growth. I think it is important to be critical, but by the same measure, it's also important not to beat oneself up too much, because it is difficult and there is often no right answer. So that is something to bear in mind. Authenticity and flexibility are important, as the pandemic has brought home very acutely. Even-handedness and empathy are equally important. Communication, team knowledge, team utilisation are so as well. And to go back to a previous point, self-care is. I think as that saying, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't really take care of anybody else. And I think it is very true. So again, making sure that we ourselves are as well prepared as possible is important. Insights from experience, again, in terms of leadership sustainability, I think it's important that staff are informed, they're involved. That involves communication, collaboration, participation. It's important to utilise and make connections, build networks or via networks. It's important to promote staff development. This might be presentations, it might be publications in an academic field. It won't be the case for everybody, but for whatever the staff interests are, their needs are, their potential future careers are going to be, or their future designs are ideally in their minds, it's important that we're supporting our staff on their journeys. We also have to protect staff and consider their welfare. So again, in terms of finally promoting team development, I think obviously pedagogic development for leadership readiness is important. Research development for research-informed teaching or teaching-inspired research can be beneficial. And team development for cohesiveness and just generally all-round performance is quite pertinent. So, pressing the wrong computer here. So this is a list of some of the sources used in the second half of this presentation. And to basically give a quick summary, I've considered practitioners' career development challenges very briefly from more of a leadership lens. I've considered leadership career development challenges. I've also considered leadership recommendations for leaderships in terms of self-development, and also for staff in terms of this team development, but also for their self-development. Apologies for the text difference here. That's basically taking it from a Microsoft system and now presenting on an Apple system. Finally, thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions, please do let me know.